Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It started with a plate I never got to serve. I'd just gotten home from work early, something rare in itself. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and butter, her favorite combination, and I'd even bought that expensive bottle of red she always claimed cured any kind of bad mood. The table was set for two, lights dimmed, and a jazz playlist hummed softly in the background. Everything was perfect. For once, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I just wanted to give her a moment of calm. A pause. Us. She walked in without knocking, without noticing, dropped her bag on the floor, slipped off her heels like the day had beaten her senseless. Then she looked at the table, not like it surprised her, but like it annoyed her. "Oh," she muttered. No smile. No curiosity. Just indifference. "What's all this?" I told her I figured we could slow down tonight, reconnect. She didn't even sit down. Grabbed a water bottle, leaned on the counter like she was waiting for the night to end before it even started. "You could have just texted," she said flatly. I had plans. That moment, that single sentence, burned. Not because it was cruel, but because it was delivered without emotion. Like a verdict. I stood there, watching the candle flicker between us, unsure whether to blow it out or let it burn on as a metaphor for what was already gone. I didn't fight. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded and cleared the second plate from the table, left her glass untouched. That's when I realized this wasn't about a bad mood or a long day. This was erosion. Quiet, calculated erosion. And I had let it happen. What hurt most wasn't the lack of love. It was the absence of effort. And in that moment, I made a decision. Not when I spoke out loud. Not yet. But something shifted inside me. Cold. Precise. A resolution without announcement. She thought I'd stay silent forever. She didn't know I'd already started leaving. 3 nights later, she came home at 12:47 a.m. No warning. No apology. Just the sound of the door clicking open, heels crossing the floor like she owned silence. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't even look up from the book I wasn't reading, just flipping the same page over and over, pretending I wasn't already somewhere else in my head. She paused at the hallway, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. She muttered a half-hearted, "Hey," and went straight to the bedroom. 5 minutes later, I heard the shower running. That sound used to mean something. Now it was just noise, proof she could come and go as she pleased, while I kept pretending it didn't tear through me. I slept on the couch that night, not out of anger, but because the bed started feeling like a negotiation. Every inch of it came with a price. Closeness if I played it right, distance if I didn't. That night, I chose neutrality. Stillness. The kind of silence that speaks louder than confrontation. When I woke up the next morning, she was already gone. No note. No text. Just a coffee mug in the sink and the echo of her perfume in the hallway. That was when I started noticing the pattern, not just in her absence, but in how calculated it had become. She had stopped asking if I was okay. Stopped pretending to care about my day, my job, my thoughts. And I stopped offering them. Not out of pride, but because I finally understood the transaction. Attention was currency, and I had overdraft too many times. The next weekend, she posted a photo. Not of us, of a rooftop bar, 2 drinks, and a caption that read, "Sometimes all you need is a good view and better company." No tags, no faces. But I wasn't an idiot. I didn't confront her. I just stared at the screen until my hand went numb, then locked my phone and sat back in the same silence I'd been feeding her for weeks. I realized I had become a ghost in my own home, still paying bills, still breathing, but invisible to the one person who should have seen me most clearly. And yet, I didn't pack my bags. I didn't explode. I watched, waited, documented her withdrawal like a scientist observing a subject. Cold, detached. She thought I was unraveling, but I was just beginning to calculate the exit. In full silence. She didn't notice I stopped asking where she was going. That was the first win. Before, I'd check in, casually drop a "what time you think you'll be back?" Not to control her, but to stay connected. To show interest. To act like we were still 2 people building something. But I realized connection isn't one-sided. And her detachment wasn't circumstantial, it was curated. So I stopped asking. Stopped reminding her to take a jacket when it got cold. Stopped noticing her heels, or her perfume, or how late the Uber pulled up outside. She started noticing that. One evening, I was in the kitchen slicing peppers for a stir-fry. She walked in, phone in hand, looked around like something was missing. Then she tilted her head and said, "You're not going to ask who I'm meeting?" I said nothing, just dropped the next pepper on the board and kept slicing. That was the first time I saw a flicker of something, uncertainty. Like I had deviated from a script she thought I would follow forever. And I had. Because silence isn't passive. It's strategic. It gives them room to talk themselves into corners. It makes every casual absence sound like a confession. Every shrug becomes a page in the file I was building in my head. I kept my tone flat, action steady, but inside, I was filing everything. Every excuse, every social post, every new studio friend she name-dropped when she wanted me to believe she wasn't disappearing, just evolving. There was a night she came back early, said she wasn't feeling well. She laid on the couch, her head inches from my lap, hoping I'd stroke her hair like I used to. I didn't move. She waited. A full 10 minutes passed before she got up and said she was going to bed. Not a word from me, because the game was over, and she knew it. She just didn't know how far ahead I was playing now. I had already changed my passwords, opened a separate account. I started listing my name on the leased documents independently, not as a threat, but as preparation. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to vanish and leave nothing for her to hold on to but the echo of what she took for granted. It started on a Tuesday. Cold, uneventful. The kind of day where no one suspects a shift. She was still asleep when I packed the small black duffel. No drama, no heavy zippers. Just essentials. Passport, laptop, a stack of documents I'd pulled from the safe over the weekend when she was at her wellness retreat. I'd waited for that trip. I needed her gone for exactly 48 hours. I had met with an attorney the day before. Quiet office. Frosted glass. I didn't say much. Just laid out the facts, not feelings. He asked a few questions. I answered in numbers and timestamps. He nodded. Said, "We'll keep this clean." That's all I wanted, clean. That morning, I deleted the shared calendar, unlinked our digital assistants, removed my name from our meal delivery app, and turned off the security camera notifications on my phone. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't care anymore what happened in that house. She woke up late and wandered into the kitchen, asked where the oat milk was, like everything was normal. I just looked at her and said, "It's probably in the back." That was the last thing I said to her in our kitchen. By noon, I had the keys to a short-term rental. Furnished. Minimalist. Quiet. I didn't decorate. Didn't hang pictures. It wasn't a new life. It was a waiting room. A place between who I was and who I was about to become. I didn't text her that night. Didn't answer her "Where are you?" message. I knew she'd wait. She always waited, because deep down, she never believed I'd leave. She thought silence was just another part of the cycle. But this wasn't silence. This was exit. I left the guest key in a drawer. No note. No hint. By the time she realized this wasn't a tantrum, it was too late to call it back. I didn't block her. I didn't unfollow. I wanted her to see everything. The gaps. The new routine. The absence of my name in her day. 3 days later, I checked the bank app. She had tried to use the joint card. Declined. I stared at the notification for a second. Then I swiped it away. I didn't smile. Didn't flinch. That moment wasn't revenge. It was clarity. You don't scream at the storm when you've already built your shelter. The funny thing is, silence doesn't feel like emptiness when you choose it. It's not loneliness. It's relief. Peace wears many faces. Mine looked like a French press on a clean counter, and my phone face down for hours at a time. No interruptions. No subtle jabs hidden behind casual remarks. No one asking me to be less of myself so they could feel more in control. On the 4th day, she called. Once. I didn't pick up. Then came a string of texts. Not frantic, strategic. A casual, "Hope you're okay," followed by, "Do you need anything from home?" Then a classic bait. "Saw your blue sweater. Want me to wash it?" She wanted me to take the hook. I didn't. Day 6, she sent a photo of our dog, hers now. The caption read, "He misses you." No, I thought. You do. I didn't answer. The absence became her mirror. She had no idea how long it would last, and that terrified her more than anything I could say. People like her don't fear anger, they fear indifference. Rage still ties us. Silence cuts. By day 8, my new routines felt like muscle memory. Wake early. Coffee. Emails. Gym. Work. Read. Sleep. No drama. No dance. The days stopped bleeding into each other. I could breathe again. I ran into Ryan, an old college friend, at a bookstore. He looked at me and said, "Man, you look light." I just nodded. There's no way to explain the weight of constant emotional negotiation unless you've lived under it. He didn't press. That's why I liked him. Meanwhile, she began to move differently. Angela told me. Said she started asking strange questions about my schedule, who I might be seeing, if I looked happy. She thinks you're punishing her, Angela said. I told her, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just done performing. On day 10, I sent her a message. Simple, direct. I'll come by next week to collect the last of my things. Let me know what day you won't be home. 2 minutes later, she replied, You don't have to do that. I'll be here. We can talk. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Talking had become her version of delay. But I wasn't delaying anymore. I was executing. The day I returned to the house felt like stepping onto a movie set I no longer belonged to. Same furniture, same layout, same curated art on the walls. But the energy had shifted. It felt like a museum of a life I no longer lived. Nothing was mine anymore, and yet everything still had my fingerprints. She wasn't home, just like I'd requested. That wasn't a courtesy, it was a boundary. I moved methodically, opened the hallway closet and packed my coats. Took down the framed prints I had bought alone, even though she always told people we chose them together. Grabbed the books she never touched, but always rearranged to impress her guests. I could still smell her perfume in the bedroom. That soft, calculated scent she wore like armor. I didn't linger. In the top drawer of the nightstand, I found the journal I had left months earlier. The one she once claimed she hadn't read. Now the pages were bent, dog-eared in places. I didn't need confirmation. Her silence afterward had already told me everything. I packed it in a separate bag. As I was pulling down a box of old photos from the closet, I heard the front door unlock. She walked in slowly, like someone stepping into a crime scene. Her eyes darted around. She wasn't surprised to see me, but she was shaken. You didn't have to do this alone, she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but because anything I said would have opened a door she no longer had a key to. She stood in the kitchen, fingers grazing the counter like she was remembering something that no longer lived there. I've been thinking a lot, she added. About what I did. About who I became. Still, I said nothing. Silence had become my strongest weapon. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity delivered in its purest form. I never thought you'd actually leave, she said. I thought you'd always come back. I looked up from the box I was taping shut and met her eyes, finally. You built a life where I was optional, I said. You just never expected me to treat it that way. Her breath hitched. She wasn't crying. Not yet, but she was unraveling. The silence between us now wasn't awkward. It was final. I walked past her with the last bag over my shoulder. As I reached the door, she said it. Those 3 words people always try to weaponize once they realize they're losing control. I need you. I didn't even turn around. Because needing someone after you've dismantled their presence is not love. It's panic. And I don't answer panic anymore. I didn't cry on the drive away. No music, no phone calls, no glance in the rearview mirror. Just miles between me and what used to be called home. Silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Like breathing in after years of living underwater. The new apartment was small, functional, and quiet. It didn't try to be anything it wasn't. I slept on a firm mattress. Cooked simple meals. Left shoes by the door without anyone commenting. The freedom wasn't loud, but it was honest. The strange part? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't post photos with cryptic captions. I didn't go out drinking with friends, claiming a new chapter. I didn't want celebration. I wanted stillness. I wanted to sit in the wreckage of who I used to be and not apologize for any of it. She texted again 2 days later. Said something about finding my old watch under the couch and asked where she should leave it. I didn't reply, because it was never about the watch. It was about the opening, the wedge, the crack in the door. And that door? It was bolted shut. Nights were different now. No background noise of shallow breathing beside me. No passive-aggressive sighs when I read too late or made toast too early. No pretending. Just me, 4 walls, and peace. Not the fireworks kind, but the kind you don't realize you're starving for until you finally taste it. One night, I got a call from her sister again. Angela had always been the quieter observer in all this. Never one to meddle, but always watching. She asked if I was okay, and I said yes, which was true in a way I hadn't understood before. She paused, then said, You know she's falling apart, right? I didn't answer. Because falling apart wasn't my responsibility anymore. Angela continued. She talks like you're coming back. Like this is just space. A phase. I let the silence stretch before I said, she's confusing my silence with patience. That's her mistake. Angela sighed. She thought you'd chase her forever. Tell her, I said quietly, that I finally learned to run in the opposite direction. That night, I opened the journal again. Not to write, but to read. Every page reminded me of how small I made myself just to make her feel tall. Every sentence, a version of me that kept waiting for validation that never came. And by the end, I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. The next morning, I went for a walk through the city. Same streets, different man. I wasn't looking for distraction. I wasn't hunting closure. I wasn't anyone's anything anymore. And that was the beginning of everything. There was a strange moment 2 weeks into my disappearance, when I realized I no longer checked my phone out of habit. Not for her name. Not for apologies. Not even for anger. The device that once buzzed with attempts to pull me back into her orbit now just told time. And even that felt optional. The journal stayed closed after that. Not because I was done with it, but because there was nothing left to prove. The pages had served their purpose. They helped me remember what I endured. And more importantly, what I'd finally escaped. On a rainy Thursday, I stopped by our old street. Not to reminisce, more like to confirm that I no longer belonged there. The windows of the house glowed faintly. The porch light was still on, like a beacon for someone who wasn't coming back. And still, I didn't feel sad. What struck me instead was how small it all looked now. The yard, the driveway, even the door I once unlocked with hope. Time hadn't shrunk the house. Perspective had. Later that week, Angela messaged again. She said Jules wasn't eating much. That she'd started therapy. That she was trying. That word people use when the house is already ashes, and they're sifting through the rubble looking for a switch to flip. Angela asked if I could meet her, Jules, not Angela. Just a coffee. Just talk. I didn't respond right away. I walked around my apartment for an hour before I finally typed. I'll think about it. I didn't think about it. I knew the answer. But I wanted to taste the power of not answering. That weekend, I went hiking alone, something I hadn't done in years. Up there, above the city, above the noise, above the chaos she used to wrap around me like a second skin, I breathed. Full, deep, unapologetic breaths. There was no metaphor in it. Just a man on a trail, finally unburdened. When I got back, I saw she had sent a photo of the lemon tart. The same one I used to bring home from the bakery she loved. The message said, "Remember this?" No question mark. Just a dangling memory, meant to draw me in. I left it on read. She followed with, "I've changed. I swear I have." But the problem was never her ability to change. It was her ability to care before the damage was irreversible. I went to sleep that night and didn't dream of her. Not even a flicker. That's when I knew I wasn't haunted anymore. But I also knew something else. She was. And she would be. It wasn't the silence that made it final. It was the lack of resistance. The kind of quiet that settles in only when someone realizes they're no longer in control. She stopped texting me that week. No more photos of desserts. No casual, just thinking of you lines. Nothing. That wasn't peace. That was surrender. Angela called once more, this time with less urgency. She sounded tired, like someone trying to patch a leak in a sinking ship with her bare hands. "She's not okay," she said quietly. "She wasn't okay when she still had me," I replied. Angela didn't argue this time. She just sighed. I didn't tell her I'd started seeing someone new. It wasn't serious. Not yet. But it was honest. Clean. I wasn't comparing her to Jules. I wasn't looking to replace a ghost. I was just breathing again. And someone finally noticed that I had lungs. That same week, I picked up the last of my belongings from the storage unit I'd stuffed them into. A box of old shirts. A framed photo from my college days. And at the very bottom, the wedding album she never had the heart to throw out, but never took the time to open again either. I didn't flip through it. I didn't need to. We had smiled in those pictures. Of course we had. But the smiles were just snapshots. Easy to fake for a camera. Harder to fake when you're sitting across from someone who hasn't really looked at you in years. By Saturday, I deleted her number. Not out of spite, but because keeping it served no purpose. I wasn't going to call. I wasn't going to answer. And that's when she emailed me. A long letter. Rambling. Emotional. Too late. She wrote that she didn't realize how cold she had been. That she thought distance was protection. that she thought I'd always be there, that I was too loyal to leave. She was right once. I had been loyal. Loyal to a fault. Loyal to the version of her that stopped existing long before I admitted it. She ended the letter with, "Please don't hate me." I didn't. But I also didn't reply. Instead, I archived it. A digital tombstone for a love that died quietly. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, watching city lights blink in patterns that meant nothing to anyone but still kept shining. I thought about how much of myself I'd poured into trying to fix what she refused to even hold. And then I stopped thinking altogether. The day I moved on wasn't marked by some dramatic closure. No loud goodbye. No final confrontation. It was quiet, like most endings. Just a moment when I realized I hadn't thought about her all day and didn't feel guilty about it. Weeks had passed. The house was long sold. My name scrubbed from the lease, the bills, the background noise. I lived in a place that didn't have her fingerprints on the walls. No scent of her shampoo in the shower. No trace of her laughter, which had long since turned into criticism. One morning, I stopped at a cafe I'd never been to before. The barista smiled and asked if I wanted room for cream. I nodded, realizing how strange it felt to be asked about something again, anything really. It wasn't love. It wasn't even connection. It was just recognition. And that was enough to remind me I hadn't been invisible. She had just stopped seeing me. Angela texted me a few days later. Said Jules was in therapy now. That she was working on herself. That she spoke about me often. Too often. I read the message once. Didn't reply. Healing doesn't require a witness. And regret doesn't equal redemption. Whatever she was trying to rebuild wasn't for me. It was for her reflection, because mine had walked away. Then one afternoon, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a book. A collection of essays about love, grief, and letting go. She had underlined sentences, dog-eared pages, left sticky notes with scribbled apologies. Her handwriting was uneven, rushed, desperate. At the end was a letter. She wrote that if I ever felt even 1% of what we once had, I'd call her. That she'd wait. That love, real love, never truly dies. But she was wrong. It does die. Not with a bang, but with repetition, with neglect, with every ignored request for connection, every rolled eye, every night spent pretending nothing was wrong. I didn't call. I burned the letter, not out of anger, but because it was time to stop rereading the pain. That weekend, I met someone new. No sparks, no instant fireworks. Just ease. Calm conversation. She asked about my favorite movie, not my deepest trauma. And when she laughed, it wasn't forced or filtered. It was real. I didn't tell her about Jules. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because some stories aren't worth retelling. And that was the end of mine. The end of trying to be enough for someone who mistook love for weakness. The end of waiting to be wanted. The end of measuring my worth by someone else's silence. I didn't need closure. I needed distance. And I finally had it. She wanted a quiet man. She got one. Just not the way she expected. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgive.